Creep, she hissed, eyes darting away when I caught her staring. My weathered hands trembled slightly, not from her words, but from the old war injuries that had marked me long before this teenage girl ever would. The irony cut deeper than any shrapnel. 3 years ago, I'd pulled her baby brother from beneath that overturned canoe, and today I wasn't even worth a second glance. When 16-year-old Zara Chen boards the number 42 bus every Tuesday, she avoids the scarred old man with the military posture. Colonel Jack Harmon notices everything, including how the girl who fears him wears the same pendant as the little boy he once resuscitated on the lakeshore. Neither realizes their paths are about to collide in ways that will heal wounds decades in the making. What will happen when Zara discovers who this creepy veteran really is? If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel and share your story of misjudging someone in the comments below. The lock to my apartment sticks in damp weather. I jiggle the key, shoulder the door open, and step into silence. Home sweet home, a one-bedroom unit in a building old enough to have witnessed both world wars. Like me, it bears its scars with dignity. I hang my coat, my movements precise. 26 years of military discipline don't fade. The small living room holds few possessions: a worn leather armchair, a bookshelf, a television I rarely watch. No photographs adorn the walls, except one dot in the bedroom. Locked in the bottom drawer of my nightstand lies a silver frame. Margaret's smile, forever frozen in time. 5-year-old Jason on her lap, gap-toothed and beaming. I only take it out on anniversaries and bad days. Today qualifies as the latter. The girl on the bus couldn't know that her whispered word, creep, echoed the voices in my head. The ones that started in Kandahar after the IED took half my face, and 3 of my men. I stand before the bathroom mirror, tracing the roadmap of scar tissue from my left temple to my jaw. The skin grafts have held well, but nothing could restore what was underneath. The left eye that no longer opens fully, the permanent downturn of my mouth. It wasn't the girl's fault. I've seen how mothers pull their children closer when I pass, how cashiers avoid touching my hand during transactions. I splash cold water on my face and swallow my evening pills dry. The VA doctor says the tremors might improve, but we both know that's a comfortable lie. In the kitchen, I prepare a simple dinner: canned soup, toast, sliced apple. I eat standing at the counter, gazing out the window at the apartment complex across the street. Families moving behind lit windows, living their connected lives. The phone rings, a rare occurrence. Jack Marlin's voice crackles through the line. My only friend, if the nurse who checks my dressings weekly counts as such. Still breathing, I answer, our usual greeting. The center needs volunteers for the fundraiser next week. You interested? The Veteran Center downtown, my one concession to socialization. I help with paperwork, sometimes speak with new arrivals. The young ones back from Syria and Afghanistan. I see myself in their hollow eyes. I'll be there. Good. And Jack, try talking to someone today. Anyone. The line goes dead before I can respond. Marlene knows me too well. I wash my dishes, methodical and thorough. Hang the towel to dry at a perfect right angle. Military corners on everything, as if order in small things might compensate for the chaos elsewhere. Night falls. I sit in darkness before the window, watching the city lights. Somewhere out there is the lake where I pulled that boy from the water 3 years ago. His small body had been so cold, so still. I'd breathed life back into him and then disappeared before the ambulance arrived. No need for gratitude, no desire for recognition. I'd done what anyone would do, hadn't I? Sleep will be elusive tonight. It always is when the memories surface. But I'll lie down anyway, close my eyes, and wait for morning, when I'll ride the number 42 bus again, invisible to everyone. Even the girl with her brother's eyes. Zara, you'll be late again. Mom's voice carried up the narrow staircase, mixing with the scent of rice, porridge, and tea. I groaned, peeling one eye open to check my phone. 6:45 a.m. Great, coming, I shouted, throwing off my blanket and jumping into the shower. Our bathroom was tiny, shared between 4 people, and perpetually damp. But at least the hot water worked today. Small mercies. Downstairs, Mom was all ready. dressed in her hospital scrubs, hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her second shift would begin right after her first ended at the convenience store. Dad had left for the restaurant hours ago. This was our normal. Kai's still sleeping, she said, sliding a bowl of congee toward me. Wake him before you leave. I nodded, shoveling food into my mouth. The kitchen walls were covered with my drawings, the only decoration we could afford. Mom had framed my acceptance letter to the specialized art program, though we all knew the tuition was beyond reach. I picked up extra weekend shifts, I said between bites, for the art supplies. Mom's face softened. You should be focusing on your regular studies. Art is good, but it doesn't pay bills. I finished her sentence, the familiar refrain. I know, Mom. Her calloused hand rested briefly on mine. We just want security for you, not the life we've had. I touched a jade dragon pendant at my throat matching the one Kai wore. Grandma's parting gifts before we left Shanghai. Protection, she'd said. After breakfast, I tiptoed into Kai's room. At 12, he was all gangly limbs and messy hair. The model airplanes he loved hung from fishing line above his bed. Buddy, time for school. I gently shook his shoulder. He blinked awake slowly, disoriented. The nightmares still came sometimes. Since the accident is a Tuesday, he mumbled. Yeah, bus. Day, I nodded. Tuesdays and Thursdays, we took the number 42 bus because Mom worked early and Dad couldn't drop us off. Kai hated it, so did I, especially since that creepy old man started riding our route. Get dressed, I'll make your lunch. Downstairs, I packed Kai's favorite dumplings from last night and sketched a quick dragon on his napkin. Art was my language of love. You're the best, Zizi Kai said, using his nickname for me as he bounded into the kitchen. Dragon pendant bouncing against his chest. We locked up and hurried to the bus stop. November wind cut through my jacket, and I pulled Kai closer. Will you help me with my science project tonight? He asked. Always. The bus lumbered around the corner. My stomach tightened. Please don't let the scarred man be there today. But as we boarded, I spotted him in his usual seat midway back, window side. His damaged face turned toward the glass, but his reflection watched everything. Everyone, stay close, I whispered, to Kai, steering him to seats far away. My friends Lily and Deshawn were already there, heads together over Deshawn's phone. That guy's here again, Lily murmured as we sat down. Just ignore him, I said, louder than necessary. But I couldn't help glancing back once, just in time to catch his eye, the good one, before he quickly looked away. The damaged one wouldn't close completely. It made him look like he was always crying. 3 years earlier, Emerald Lake, the morning fog hovered over the water like a spirit, reluctant to leave. I'd arrived at dawn, setting up my fishing gear with practiced efficiency. The doctors had recommended peaceful activities. Fishing qualified, though peace remained elusive. This far from the city, the silence was absolute. No cars, no people. Just the occasional splash of a fish breaking the surface. This was why I came. Here the solitude matched my soul. I cast my line, watched it arc through the mist. The tremor in my hands was worse in the cool air, but I managed. Small victories. By mid-morning, the sun had burned away the fog, revealing the lake's emerald waters. I'd caught nothing, but that wasn't really the point. Time passed differently here. The rigid military discipline that still governed my life loosened its grip. The sound of laughter shattered my reverie high, childish. A family had arrived at the public dock about 50 yards down the shore. Parents unloading a canoe, a teenage girl helping, a small boy dancing with excitement. I turned away, reeling in my line to move farther down the bank. Their happiness was a private thing, not for me to witness. Then, everything changed in an instant. A shout, a splash, frantic screaming. I turned, to see the canoe overturned, the father surfacing, gasping, the mother screaming a name. Kai, Kai. The teenage girl frozen in horror on the dock. No sign of the boy. My body moved before my mind could process. 26 years of combat training, assessed act. I dropped my rod and sprinted down the bank, kicking off my boots as I ran. The water hit like ice. The shock nearly stopped my heart. but I pushed forward, powerful strokes, carrying me to the overturned canoe. The father was diving repeatedly, surfacing with panic in his eyes. He's trapped underneath. I can't reach him. I nodded once and dove. The murky water stung my eyes. Beneath the canoe, suspended in a pocket of air, a small body hung limp, tangled in a life vest, caught on something. The boy's eyes were closed. Lips blue. One deep breath, and I dove again. Knife from my pocket already open. The nylon straps parted easily. I wrapped my arm around the child's chest and pushed upward, away from the canoe. We broke the surface into chaos. Hands reached for the boy. I passed him to his father, then helped flip the canoe to prevent further danger. On shore, the boy wasn't breathing. "I'm a medic," I said, the first words I'd spoken. My training took over. Airway, breathing, circulation, the CPR rhythm I'd performed. Too many times in dust-choked military hospitals. 1 minute passed. 2. The family sobbing. My hands steady now, when it mattered most. Then a cough, water spilling from small lips. Eyes fluttering open, confused and afraid. The mother collapsed, beside her son, gathering him into her arms. The father gripped my shoulder, words of gratitude streaming through tears. But I was already backing away. Sirens in the distance. Questions would come. Attention. Photographs. "Wait," the teenage girl called. "Who are you?" I turned without answering and disappeared into the trees, leaving my fishing gear behind. My truck was parked on the service road. Within minutes, I was driving away as ambulance lights flashed through the trees behind me. Just another ghost. Passing through their lives, the Veterans Center occupied an old brick building downtown, sandwiched between a bodega and a pawn shop. Inside, it smelled of coffee and disinfectant, a place of transition men and women caught between who they'd been and who they might become. I volunteered Wednesdays and Fridays, filing paperwork and occasionally speaking with newcomers. Today, I was organizing donation receipts, a task I found oddly soothing. "You're quieter than usual, Jack," Marlene said, sliding a mug of black coffee onto my desk. She'd been a combat nurse in Desert Storm, the only person who never flinched at my scars. "Am I usually talkative?" She snorted. "Point taken, but something's bothering you." I hesitated. Marlene had a gift for extracting confidences. "The bus girl, I've seen her before. The one who thinks you're a creep? Her brother was the boy at the lake. The one I pulled out?" Marlene's eyebrows shot up. "You sure?" I nodded. "She wears a jade pendant. Dragon design? So does her brother." I remembered it, caught in the canoe straps. "Have you said anything?" What would I say? "Remember me, the disfigured stranger who disappeared after saving your brother. They've moved on. Better to leave it that way." Marlene perched on the edge of my desk. "Or maybe they've been looking for you, to thank you." "I don't need gratitude. Maybe they need to give it." I changed the subject, asking about the fundraiser logistics. Marlene let me, but her eyes said our conversation wasn't over. Later, I helped a young Marine with paperwork for prosthetic benefits. His leg had been taken by an IED in Fallujah, the same weapon that had reshaped my face and ended my career. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. "Does it get easier?" he asked suddenly, knuckles white around his cane. I considered lying, considered the rehearsed speech about time healing all wounds. "Not easier," I said instead. "Different. You build around it." He nodded, relief in his eyes at the honesty. By the time I left, rain was falling in sheets. I hunched in my coat at the bus stop, grateful for the empty bench. The number 42 appeared through the downpour, wipers fighting a losing battle. I boarded, nodded to the driver on. 50-something, always had racing forms tucked in his breast pocket, headed for my usual seat. She was there. The girl alone this time, no friends or brother. She looked up as I passed, her expression shifting from surprise to discomfort to something unreadable. I continued to the back, taking a seat where I could see the entire bus, but wouldn't be easily observed. Force of habit. In Kandahar, situational. Awareness meant survival. The rain intensified, drowning the city in gray. Through the streaked window, I watched people running for shelter. Newspapers held over heads, storefronts glowing like havens. At the third stop, an elderly woman struggled aboard, arms laden with groceries. The bus lurched forward before she found a seat, sending her stumbling. I rose automatically, steadying her with a firm but gentle grip. "Ma'am," I offered my seat. "Thank you, young man," she said, seemingly unbothered by my appearance. Her wrinkled hand patted mine. Not many gentlemen left these days. From the corner of my eye, I caught the girl watching our exchange. Her expression puzzled, reassessing. I moved to stand by the rear door, holding the overhead rail. The girl quickly looked away, but something had shifted in the air between us. Recognition, perhaps, or just the first crack in her perception of me. Either way, it wouldn't matter tomorrow. Focus on the contrasts. People. Light against shadow. Smooth against rough. Ms. Winters circled the art studio, her silver bangles jingling with each gesture. Your midterm portraits should reveal something hidden about your subject. I stared at my blank canvas, charcoal poised but unmoving. Around me, other students were already sketching, their faces pinched in concentration, struggling Zara. Ms. Winters paused beside me. "I can't decide on a subject," I admitted. "Then let your hand decide." She tapped my sketchbook. "Stop thinking. Start drawing." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting my hand move across the paper without direction. When I looked down, I'd drawn a partial face of man's eye and cheekbone heavily scarred. The bus man. Interesting. Ms. Winters studied my sketch. "There's emotion here. Pain, but dignity too." "Who is he?" "Nobody," I said too quickly. "Just someone I see sometimes." She raised an eyebrow, but didn't press. "Well, nobody has a compelling face." I'd explore this further. After she moved on, I continued the sketch, adding details I'd only glimpsed. The way his damaged eye never fully closed. The proud set of his shoulders, despite the slight tremor in his hands. The military precision in his movements. Lily leaned over from the next easel. "Is that the creepy bus guy? Why would you draw him?" I didn't have an answer. Not one I could articulate. The bell rang before I could finish, but the image stayed with me through my next 2 classes. During lunch, I found myself adding more details in my sketchbook, refining the portrait until it looked less like a monster and more like a man who'd seen monstrous things. "That's really good," said a voice behind me. Kai had appeared, lunch, tray in hand. "Who is it?" I closed the sketchbook quickly. "No one. Just practice." Kai sat beside me, digging into his pizza. "Reminds me of my angel," he said through a mouthful. "What angel? The one who saved me at the lake?" Remember, he had a broken face too. A chill ran through me. "You never told me that." Kai shrugged. "Mom and Dad don't like when I talk about it. They say it gives me nightmares. Do you?" "Remember him clearly?" I asked carefully. "Sort of. It was all blurry. But I remember his eyes. One was sad, and his hands were strong but gentle." Kai fidgeted with his dragon pendant. He disappeared before I could thank him. The cafeteria noise faded to background as pieces clicked into place. The way the bus man had looked at Kai last week, the recognition in his eyes. "Kai, what else do you remember about that day?" "Not much. I was playing with the toy boat by the canoe. Then I was underwater and couldn't breathe. Then the angel was pushing on my chest, and water came out of my mouth." He made a face at the memory. "Then the ambulance people came, but the angel was gone. Did Mom and Dad try to find him?" "Yeah, Dad put something in the newspaper. A reward and stuff. But nobody ever called." Kai pushed his tray away. "I've got to go. Science club meeting." After he left, I pulled out my phone and searched local news archives. Emerald Lake Rescue. Boy canoe. Several articles appeared. I clicked the first one. Local family seeks mystery hero after near drowning at Emerald Lake. The article included a blurry photo taken by another fisherman, a tall figure running from the scene. Face indistinguishable. But I'd know that military posture anywhere. It was him. The man I'd been calling a creep was my brother's rescuer. The man who'd saved Kai's life. The storm arrived without warning, transforming a gray afternoon into a deluge. I'd forgotten my umbrella rookie mistake for November in the Pacific Northwest. The bus shelter offered minimal protection as wind drove the rain sideways. I huddled against the plexiglass, calculating how soaked I'd be by the time the number 42 arrived. Footsteps splashed toward the shelter. I looked up to see the girl Zara. I'd heard her friends call her, rushing toward the same refuge. She froze when she saw me, indecision plain on her face. Brave the storm or share space with the creep? Finally, practicality won. She stepped under the shelter, positioning herself at the opposite end, body angled away from me. We stood in uncomfortable silence, the space between us charged with unspoken words. An elderly woman approached, struggling against the wind with a wire shopping cart. Without thinking, I stepped into the rain to help her, guiding both woman and cart under the shelter. "Bless you," she said, patting my wet sleeve. "These old bones don't handle storms like they used to." "My pleasure, ma'am." The woman began chatting about her grandchildren, seemingly unbothered by my appearance. I nodded politely, aware of Zara watching our interaction from the corner of her eye. When the woman opened her purse to show photos, her shopping bag tipped. Groceries spilled across the wet sidewalk. Both Zara and I moved at once, kneeling to retrieve scattered oranges and canned goods. "Thank you, dear," the woman said to Zara. "You and your father are so kind." "Oh, we're not," Zara began, then stopped, meeting my eye briefly before looking away. Together, we restored the woman's groceries. Our hands reached for the same can of soup, fingers brushing momentarily. Zara didn't flinch away as I'd expected. A sudden lightning flash illuminated the shelter, followed immediately by a deafening thunderclap. The sound hit me like a physical blow. Suddenly, I wasn't in Seattle anymore, but back in Kandahar. Explosion, screaming, the taste of dust and blood. My vision tunneled. Breath came in shallow gasps. The tremor in my hands intensified to violent shaking. "Sir, are you okay?" Through the fog of memory, Zara's voice reached me. She stood a careful distance away, concern replacing the usual wariness in her eyes. "Fine," I managed, voice rougher than intended. "Just ... don't like storms." Understanding dawned on her face. "My uncle's the same way. He was in Iraq." I nodded, focusing on my breathing techniques. In 4-4, hold for 4, out for 4. The presence slowly reasserted itself. Rain on pavement, traffic sounds, the smell of wet concrete. "Would you like some water?" Zara offered a small bottle from her backpack, arm extended cautiously. I accepted it with as much dignity as I could muster. "Thank you." The bus peered through the curtain of rain, headlights cutting the gloom. The elderly woman gathered her cart, thanking us again as the bus doors opened. Zara hesitated, then gestured for me to board first. A small courtesy, but it felt monumental. I took my usual seat, expecting her to move to the back with her friends. Instead, she sat across the aisle, not quite next to me, but not running away either. For the first time, she looked directly at me without disgust or fear, just quiet assessment. Then she pulled out a sketchbook, pencil moving swiftly across the page. I pretended not to notice she was drawing me, just as I pretended not to notice the jade dragon pendant at her throat, identical to the one that had nearly drowned her brother 3 years ago. "Hey, Squirt, what are you working on?" I dropped my backpack by the door and peered over Kai's shoulder. Our kitchen table had disappeared beneath a scatter of plastic airplane parts, glue bottles, and tiny paint jars. "F-16, Fighting Falcon," Kai said without looking up, his small fingers deftly attaching a wing. 1:72 scale. "Dad said if I finish my homework first, we could paint it tonight." I ruffled his hair and headed to the refrigerator. "Where is Dad?" Called in for an extra shift. "Mom, too." Kai carefully aligned a decal. "There's leftover dumplings." Typical Tuesday. I heated food for both of us, watching Kai work. 3 years after the accident, he'd developed an obsession with anything that flew, planes, rockets, even birds. His therapist said it was his way of processing the trauma, transforming fear into fascination. "I saw your angel today," Kai said. Suddenly, I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. "What angel?" "From the lake. The one with the broken face." He looked up, eyes serious. "He was on our bus this morning." You called him creepy, but he's not. He's my angel." A chill ran through me. So Kai had recognized him too. "Are you sure it's the same person?" I set our food on the table, careful to avoid the model parts. Kai nodded emphatically. "I'm sure. I remember his eyes. One is always sad. Like it's crying." I sat heavily in the chair opposite him. "Why didn't you say something before?" "I wasn't completely sure until today. And, ... He hesitated. "You seemed scared of him." "I wasn't scared," I said automatically. "Just cautious." Kai gave me a look to knowing for his 12 years. "You were mean to him?" The guilt I'd been carrying since discovering the truth intensified. "Yeah, I was." "Why?" How could I explain adult fears to a child? That a scarred man watching children made my internal alarms blare. That the world had taught me to mistrust difference. I judged him without knowing him. I said finally, "That was wrong of me." Kai nodded, satisfied with my admission. He saved me. I'd be dead without him. The blunt truth in a child's voice. I swallowed hard. "Do you remember anything else about that day?" I asked. Kai's face scrunched in concentration. Water in my lungs. Cold. Then his hands pushing on my chest. Strong hands, but gentle. He demonstrated the CPR motion. Then breathing. In my mouth, it tasted like coffee and fish. Such visceral details from a 9-year-old's memory of nearly drowning. What happened after that? The ambulance came, but he was gone. Kai returned to his model. Dad was really mad that he left. Said he wanted to thank him properly. After dinner, while Kai showered, I searched Dad's desk for the file he'd kept about the accident. Behind his tax documents, I found a manila envelope labeled Lake Incident. Inside were the hospital reports, insurance claims, and several newspaper clippings. Mystery hero saves child from drowning. Family seeks rescuer to express gratitude. Good Samaritan disappears after heroic lake rescue. A grainy photo accompanied. The last article, a tall figure running from the scene, faced indistinguishable, but the military bearing unmistakable. Underneath was a flyer Dad had created. "To the man who saved our son at Emerald Lake on June 12th, we are forever in your debt and wish to thank you personally. Please contact the Chen family." Our phone number followed, along with the offer of a reward. He never called. I replaced everything except one clipping, which I slipped into my sketchbook. Tomorrow was Tuesday. Bus day. Time to face the angel with the broken face and my own shame at how I'd treated him. The city library smelled of dust and possibility. I'd come straight from school, telling Mom I needed to research an art history project. Not entirely a lie, was researching, just not for class. "Can I help you find something?" The librarian's smile was genuine beneath her cat-eye glasses. "I'm looking for information on local veterans," I said, "specifically from Afghanistan." She directed me to the periodicals section and the digital archives. "Any particular veteran?" I hesitated. "I don't know his name, just that he has facial scarring and probably served in Afghanistan." Her expression softened with understanding. "Try the military service databases. And the Veterans Center downtown keeps records of local service members." For the next hour, I scrolled through digital archives of the city paper, searching for any mention of decorated veterans or injured servicemen returning home. Nothing matched the busman's description. Switching tactics, I searched Afghanistan veteran facial injuries, Seattle. A 5-year-old article appeared. Local heroes return home. The group photos showed 7 men and women in uniform, standing before an airplane. Third from the left stood a tall man with an unobstructed face, handsome, with a strong jaw and clear eyes. The caption read, "LT. Colonel Jack Harmon Center returns with his unit after their 3rd deployment." I enlarged the image. The eyes, I recognized them immediately. The good one, at least. This was him, before whatever had happened to his face. Further searching revealed more articles. Seattle officer, awarded Silver Star for bravery under fire. Local battalion returns with heavy casualties. Military honors for Kandahar heroes in each photo. Colonel Harmon appeared, his expression growing more haunted with each deployment. And a headline that made my stomach drop: Tragedy strikes. Military family, wife and son of decorated officer killed in accident. The article, dated 7 years ago, detailed how Margaret Harmon and her 5-year-old son, Jason, had died in a car crash while Colonel Harmon was deployed overseas. 3 months later, another headline: Seattle officer among those injured in Kandahar bombing, no photos accompanied. This article, just a brief mention that Colonel Harmon had sustained significant injuries and was being treated at Walter Reed Medical Center. After that, nothing. He'd vanished from public record. I sat back, trying to process what I'd learned. The man I'd been calling a creep had lost everything: his family, while he was serving his country. Then his face, and likely his career, in an explosion. And somehow, in the midst of that unimaginable pain, he'd still had the courage and compassion to save my brother, while I'd whispered creep and averted my eyes. Shame burned through me, hot and sickening. I printed the articles, tucking them into my backpack, alongside my sketchbook. As I was leaving, the librarian stopped me. "Did you find what you were looking for?" "Yes," I said, "but I wish I hadn't treated him so badly before I knew." She tilted her head. "The wonderful thing about knowledge is that it gives us a chance to do better next time." Outside, rain fell softly as dusk settled over the city. I missed my usual bus, taking the later one instead. Colonel Jack Harmon, the name suited him strong, dignified. He'd be on the number 42 tomorrow morning. What would I say? How could I possibly apologize for treating a hero, my brother's savior, like a monster? The words wouldn't come, but an idea did. I pulled out my sketchbook and began to draw. The portrait forming beneath my fingers, not focusing on his scars, but on the strength and kindness in his eyes, the dignity in his bearing, the hands that had saved my brother. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. Something was different about the bus this morning. Ron, the driver, nodded his usual greeting, but there was a peculiar look in his eye, almost conspiratorial. "Morning, Colonel," he said as I boarded, the first time he'd ever acknowledged my rank. I froze briefly, then moved past him. How did he know? I hadn't used my title since medical discharge. My usual seat was occupied not by a person, but by a carefully wrapped package. Brown paper tied with twine, my name written in elegant script on the front. Not Jack or Mr. Harmon, but Colonel Harmon. I stared at it, unmoving, as the bus pulled away from the curb. In Kandahar, unexpected packages meant death. Old instincts screamed danger. But this was Seattle, not a war zone. With cautious fingers, I lifted the package. Lightweight, flexible. I inspected each side before carefully untying the twine. The paper fell away to reveal a large envelope and what appeared to be a framed picture. I opened the envelope first. To the hero from Emerald Lake, the note began in the same elegant handwriting. 3 years ago, you saved my brother's life and disappeared before we could thank you. You left behind your fishing gear and took with you our eternal gratitude. I have seen you on the bus for weeks now, and am ashamed to admit I judged you harshly, based only on your appearance. Yesterday, I learned the truth, both about Kai's rescue and about your service to our country. No apology can erase my behavior, but please accept this small token of my gratitude for my brother's life and my deepest respect for your sacrifices. The girl who was wrong about you. My hands trembled as I set the note aside and turned over the framed picture. It was me, but not as I saw myself in the mirror each day. This was a portrait drawn with startling skill, capturing not just my features but something deeper. The artist had depicted my scars with unflinching honesty, yet somehow they didn't dominate the image. Instead, the focus was on my eyes, one damaged, one intact, both alive with an inner light I hadn't seen in my own reflection for years. It was how I might have looked if the explosion had taken my flesh but not my spirit. Something hot and unfamiliar tracked down my cheek. I touched it, surprised to find moisture, tears. I hadn't cried since the day I received news of Margaret and Jason. The bus stopped at a red light, and Ron caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "Artistic girl left that for you," he said. "Been riding early all week to catch your seat before you board. Said it was important." The girl, Zara. Her name came to me suddenly, heard in passing from her friends. I traced the lines of the portrait with a fingertip. Such perception, in one so young, to see past the ruin to the man beneath. To recognize the humanity her previous behavior had denied. The simple kindness of it broke something loose inside me, some frozen shard that had lodged in my chest since the explosion, since Margaret and Jason, since everything. I carefully rewrapped the portrait, tucking it into my coat. All these years, I'd avoided gratitude, believing I deserved none. I'd pulled the boy from the lake because it was the right thing to do, not for recognition. But perhaps Marlene was right. Perhaps the girl and her family needed to give thanks as much as I needed to receive it. At my stop, I nodded to Ron, who winked in return. "She be on the afternoon route," he said, unprompted. "Usually sits in the back, drawing." I stepped off the bus into weak November sunshine, the portrait a comforting weight against my chest. For the first time in years, I had something to look forward to. "Are you sure about this?" I asked Kai for the third time. He nodded enthusiastically, bouncing on his toes at the bus stop. I want to meet my angel properly. I'd spent the morning explaining everything to him. How the creepy busman was actually Colonel Jack Harmon, the person who'd saved him at the lake. How I'd been wrong to judge him. How we needed to thank him properly. Kai had insisted on coming with me, skipping his after-school robotics club. Mom and Dad were working late again, so they wouldn't know we'd deviated from our routine. Double quotes, just, ... Let me do the talking first, okay? Okay, ZZ. Kai fidgeted with his dragon pendant, excitement radiating from him. The number 42 rounded the corner right. On schedule. My stomach tightened as we boarded. Ron, the driver, gave me a subtle nod. We'd become conspirators in this small redemption. I scanned the bus anxiously. There in his usual spot. Colonel Harmon sat straight-backed, gazing out the window. The portrait I'd left was nowhere to be seen. Had he hated it, thrown it away? My courage faltered, but Kai had no such hesitation. Before I could stop him, he darted down the aisle, stopping directly in front of Colonel Harmon. "Are you my angel?" he asked, voice carrying through the quiet bus. Colonel Harmon's head turned slowly. His good eye widened with recognition, then uncertainty. He looked from Kai to me, standing frozen a few seats back. "I'm not an angel, son," he said, voice low and rough. "You saved me from the lake," Kai persisted. "I almost died, but you brought me back." The other passengers were watching now, curious about the exchange. I forced myself forward, placing a protective hand on Kai's shoulder. "I'm sorry," I said to Colonel Harmon. "He insisted on coming when I told him who you were." Colonel Harmon's gaze held mine, searching. "You left the portrait." "Yes, it was, ... double quotes." He paused, seeming to search for words. "Generous in its perception." "It was honest," I countered. More honest than I was before. A hint of a smile touched the undamaged corner of his mouth. It transformed his face, making the scars seem less dominant. Kai, impatient with adult circumspection, thrust out his hand. "I'm Kai Chen. Thank you for saving me." After a moment's hesitation, Colonel Harmon shook the offered hand. "Jack Harmon, and you're welcome. Your face got broken after you saved me," Kai asked with a child's directness. I cringed. "Kai." But Colonel Harmon shook his head. "It's all right." To Kai, he said, "No, this happened before." "In Afghanistan?" "Cool," Kai said, then immediately backpedaled. "I mean, not cool that you got hurt, but cool that you were a soldier." "May we sit?" I asked, gesturing to the empty seats across from him. He nodded, an almost imperceptible movement. We sat, Kai directly opposite Colonel Harmon, leaning forward eagerly. "Did you know I was wearing this when I fell in?" He pulled out his dragon pendant. "It got caught in the canoe straps. That's why I couldn't get out." Colonel Harmon nodded. "I remember. I had to cut it free. But you saved it too." Kai beamed. "Mom said the doctors found it still around my neck at the hospital. I tried to cut the strap, not the necklace itself. It seemed important." "It was my grandmother's," I explained. "She gave matching ones to Kai and me before we left China." The bus jolted over a pothole, breaking the moment. I realized we'd passed our usual stop. Would you? I began at the same time Colonel Harmon said. Perhaps we both stopped. He gestured for me to continue. Would you like to get coffee or hot chocolate for Kai? There's a cafe at the next stop. We'd like to thank you properly. Colonel Harmon considered this, his expression guarded yet hopeful. I'd like that, he said finally. As the bus continued through the gray afternoon, something shifted between us, the beginning of a connection none of us had expected. The cafe near the bus stop was a small, steamy refuge from the November chill. Mismatched furniture and local art created a bohemian atmosphere where Colonel Harmon's scars drew fewer stares than they might elsewhere. We sat at a corner table, awkwardness settling around us like a fog. Kai, oblivious to adult tension, happily slurped his hot chocolate mustache forming on his upper lip. So, I began, searching for words adequate to the moment. I don't even know where to start. Colonel Harmon, Jack, as he'd asked us to call him, cupped his coffee mug with scarred hands. No need for speeches. You've already said more than enough with your drawing. It wasn't enough, I countered. I need to say this out loud. I'm sorry for how I treated you on the bus, for calling you ... I couldn't finish. Creepy. His mouth twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. I've been called worse. That doesn't make it right? No, he agreed. But it makes it human. Kai looked between us, confused by the undercurrents. Were you mean to my angel, Zizi? I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Yes, I was. And I was wrong. Jack shifted uncomfortably at the angel designation, but didn't correct Kai again. My parents tried to find you, I said, after the accident. They wanted to thank you properly. He nodded. I saw the newspaper notices. Why didn't you come forward? His gaze dropped to his coffee. I didn't do it for recognition. Then why did you do it? The question hung in the air between us. Finally, he looked up, his mismatched eyes direct and unflinching, because he needed help, and I could give it. Simple. Profound. Kai, growing restless, pointed to Jack's hands. How did you get so strong? When you pushed the water out of me, it felt like an elephant sitting on my chest. Jack's expression softened. 26 years of military service. Build some muscle. Were you in lots of wars? Kai, I warned, that's personal. It's all right, Jack said. Yes, young man. Several conflicts. Afghanistan, most recently. Is that where your face got broken? I winced at my brother's bluntness, but Jack seemed untroubled by the question. Yes, an improvised explosive device. Bomb. It caught the left side of my transport. Did it hurt? Kai, I hissed. That's enough questions. But Jack shook his head. Curiosity is natural. To Kai, he said, yes, it hurt very much. Still does sometimes. Like my leg after I broke it skateboarding. Something like that, but more widespread. Kai nodded, satisfied with the comparison. I have a scar too. Want to see? Without waiting for an answer, he pulled up his pant leg to reveal a thin white line along his shin. 5 stitches. Jack examined it with exaggerated seriousness. Impressive. That must have been quite an injury. It was awesome. There was blood everywhere, and Mom fainted. And drink your chocolate. I interrupted, nudging his mug closer. A small silence fell, more comfortable than the last. Jack watched Kai with something like wistfulness. I remembered the articles. I'd read his son would have been around Kai's age now. Your portrait, Jack said suddenly. It was ... unexpected. Good unexpected or bad unexpected? Good. I don't see myself that way. Not anymore. It's how I see you now, I said quietly. How I should have seen you from the beginning. He held my gaze for a long moment, something unguarded in his expression. What will you do with it? I asked. I've hung it by my door, he said. First thing I see when I leave. Last thing when I return. A pause. A reminder that perception can change. Kai, chocolate finished, tugged at Jack's sleeve. Do you like airplanes? I build models. I do, Jack said, and for the first time, a genuine smile transformed his face. I flew in quite a few. Really? Which ones? As Jack described a military aircraft to my enraptured brother, I watched the man emerge fully from behind the scars and, my own prejudice? Absolutely not, I said, when Zara first suggested it. Your parents don't know me. They wouldn't want a stranger at their dinner table. You're not a stranger, she insisted. You saved their son's life. We were walking from the cafe, Kai skipping ahead, stopping occasionally to ensure we were following. The afternoon was fading into evening, street lights flickering on, all the more reason for formality. A proper introduction, not an ambush. Over dinner. It's not an ambush if you're invited. Zara's determination reminded me of certain lieutenants. I'd commanded the movable once they'd decided on a course of action. Besides, I already texted them. They're expecting you. I stopped walking. You what? She had the grace to look slightly abashed, while you were telling Kai about helicopters. I told them we found Yukai's rescuer. They want to meet you. I ran a hand through my cropped hair, a nervous habit from before the explosion. I'm not prepared for this. Neither were you prepared to jump into a freezing lake after my brother. Her logic was impeccable and infuriating. Sometimes the best things happen without preparation. Kai raced back to us. Come on, Mom's making red braised pork. It's the best thing ever. Looking at his eager face, the face I'd seen blue and lifeless beneath, that Kanui found my objections dissolving. All right, I conceded, but I won't stay long. The Chen apartment was on the third floor of a modest building near the University District, smaller than I'd expected, but immaculately kept. Family photos lined the entryway walls. Chinese calligraphy. Scrolls hung in the living room. The smell of star anise and soy sauce filled the air. Mrs. Chen rushed from the kitchen when we entered, wiping her hands on an apron. Her eyes widened at the sight of me, taking in my scars without comment. Then she did something completely unexpected. She burst into tears and hugged me. Thank you, she said against my shoulder. Thank you for my son's life. Awkwardly, I patted her back, looking helplessly at Zara over her mother's head. Zara merely shrugged, smiling. Mr. Chen emerged from another room, more reserved than his wife, but equally emotional. He gripped my hand firmly. We have waited 3 years to thank you properly. No thanks necessary, I said automatically. Anyone would have done the same. No, Mr. Chen said with quiet authority. Not anyone. We watched others freeze in panic while our son was drowning. Only you acted. Mrs. Chen wiped her eyes and returned to the kitchen, insisting I sit at the table while she finished cooking. Mr. Chen poured tea, asking careful questions about my military service. Infantry, I answered. 26 years. Retired now. And your family? He asked. Gone. The word hung in the air. My wife and son, 7 years ago. Car accident while I was deployed. Understanding passed between us father to father. I am sorry for your loss. Children should outlive their parents. Zara and Kai set the table around us. Their movements, choreographed by long practice. 4 placemats became 5. 4 cups, 5. The household expanded to include me with surprising ease. When Mrs. Chen brought out steaming dishes, the promised red braised pork, stir-fried greens, soup, and rice, she insisted I take the first portion of everything. Guest of honor, she explained, heaping food onto my plate throughout dinner. They spoke in a mixture of English and Mandarin, Zara occasionally translating idioms or cultural references. Kai dominated the conversation, as children often do, telling me about his school projects and friends. The simple normalcy of Ida family dinner, conversation. Laughter was something I hadn't experienced since losing Margaret and Jason. I'd forgotten the comfort of belonging, however, temporarily, at someone's table. You must come again, Mrs. Chen insisted as I prepared to leave. Sunday dinner, every week. Mom, Zara protested. Colonel Harmon might have other commitments. Do you? Mrs. Chen asked directly. The truth was, I didn't. My Sundays, like all my days, followed the same solitary routine. No, I admitted. No commitments. Then it's settled, she said with the finality of someone unused to being refused. Sunday dinner, 6 o'clock. As Zara walked me to the bus. Stop. A light rain began to fall. "I'm sorry about my mother," she said. "She can be overwhelming." "She's kind," I said. "You all are. It's the least we can do." I shook my head. "You've already done more than you know." "I can't do this," Jack said, staring at the school gymnasium doors. "Too many people." "You can," I insisted, adjusting the collar of his borrowed sport coat. Dad's jacket was slightly too small for Jack's broader shoulders, but it was better than the weathered coat he usually wore. "My entire grade is expecting you." "You didn't tell me it was a public event," he grumbled. "I thought it was just a classroom critique. It's the winter showcase. All the visual art students display their work." I took his arm, surprised too. "Find it rock solid with tension." "Please, Jack, your portrait is the centerpiece of my series." His expression softened at the use of his first name, something I'd only recently started doing. The transition from Colonel Harmon had been deliberate, a bridge between formality and friendship. "What was your series called again?" he asked, stalling. "The Faces We Don't See." I tugged gently at his arm. "Specifically, veterans who've become invisible in society. You're not the only subject, but you're the most important." Jack took a deep breath, squared his shoulders like he was facing enemy fire rather than a high school art show, and nodded once. "Lead the way." Inside, the gymnasium had been transformed with temporary walls displaying student artwork. Clusters of parents, teachers, and students moved between the exhibits, voices creating a gentle murmur beneath the soft classical music. I guided Jack toward the far corner where my display was set up, 5 large portraits arranged in a semicircle. His was the central image, flanked by 4 other veterans I'd sketched at the downtown center after he'd introduced me. "They're all here," Jack murmured, recognizing the faces. "Marcus, Elena, Darnell, Charisse. They came to support you," I confirmed, "and to see themselves through someone else's eyes." The other veterans stood near my display, forming a small island of military bearing amid the civilian crowd. They straightened when they saw Jack, not quite saluting, but offering the deference his rank still commanded. Colonel Marcus nodded. "The girl has talent." "That she does," Jack agreed, studying each portrait in turn. I'd drawn them all with the same technique and flinching honesty about their physical appearances, but with emphasis on the dignity and humanity in their eyes. Jack's portrait remained the most powerful. Perhaps because I'd known him the longest, or perhaps because his journey from creepy busman to friend gave the image additional emotional weight. Ms. Winters approached, clipboard in hand. "Zara, the judges are coming through in 10 minutes. Are you ready to discuss your artistic choices?" I nodded, suddenly nervous. The showcase winners would be eligible for a special scholarship program. "Your subjects add powerful context," Ms. Winters continued, acknowledging the veterans with respect. "Will they mind answering questions?" Jack answered for the group. "We're here to support the artist." As Ms. Winters moved on, Jack studied his portrait more closely. "You've made me look human," I supplied when he faltered. I was going to say whole. Same thing, isn't it? A small crowd gathered as the judges approached. I explained my artistic process, the symbolism of light and shadow, my choice to focus on eyes rather than scars or injuries. "And your subjects?" one judge asked. "How did you select them?" I gestured to Jack. "Colonel Harmon saved my brother's life 3 years ago, though I didn't know it when I first saw him. I judged him based solely on his appearance. This series is my attempt to correct that mistake, to truly see the people we so often look past." The judges nodded approvingly, making notes. As they moved to the next exhibit, Jack touched my arm lightly. "You've done a good thing here. Not just the art, though, that's remarkable, but creating visibility." "I had a good subject," I said, "someone who taught me to look deeper." For the first time since I'd known him, Jack seemed genuinely at peace with his scars. Standing beside his portrait, surrounded by people who saw him as I now did, he finally looked whole. Jack missed our usual Tuesday meeting at the cafe. I waited an hour, checking my phone repeatedly, before finally accepting he wasn't coming. It wasn't like him. In the 2 months since we'd discovered his identity, Jack had become a fixture in our lives: Sunday dinners with my family, Tuesday afternoons with me and Kai, occasional weekend outings when his health permitted. He was unfailingly punctual, almost rigid in his reliability. I called the Veterans Center, where the receptionist told me Jack hadn't come in for his volunteer shift either. "He's never missed without calling," she said, concern evident in her voice. "Do you want Marlene's number? She might know something." Marlene, the nurse who checked Jack's dressings, answered on the first ring. "He's at Harborview," she said without preamble. "PTSD episode, worse than usual. They've kept him for observation." My heart sank. What happened? Construction site near his apartment building. Unexpected demolition. The sound triggered a flashback. He was found unresponsive in his hallway by a neighbor. "Is he... Can he have visitors?" "Family only," Marlene said, then added more softly, "but they don't check too carefully. Room 412. He could use a friendly face." I skipped my afternoon classes and took the bus to Harborview Medical Center. The hospital smell hit me immediately, antiseptic and underlying illness. I found my way to the 4th floor, heart pounding as I approached room 412. The door was partially open. I knocked gently. "Come in," Jack's voice, weaker than usual. He lay in the hospital bed, and I gave him his arm, face paler than I'd ever seen it. The scarring seemed more pronounced against his pallor. "Zara," he said, surprise and something like embarrassment crossing his features. "You shouldn't be here. Neither should you. Yet here we are." I pulled a chair close to the bed. "Why didn't you call me?" He looked away. "Not something you needed to see." "What happened?" "They're tearing down the building across the street. The explosives, ... double quotes." He trailed off, swallowing hard. Suddenly, I was back in Kandahar. The transport burning, my men screaming. His hand trembled on the blanket. Without thinking, I covered it with mine. "Marlene says you were unresponsive for nearly an hour." He nodded, still not meeting my eyes. "It happens sometimes. Not usually this bad." I looked around the stark hospital. Room no flowers, no cards, no personal items except his folded clothes on a chair. The loneliness of it struck me like a physical blow. "I should go," I said, rising. "You need rest. Wait." His hand caught mine, surprisingly strong despite the tremor. "Thank you for coming." "Of course. No," he said more insistently. "You don't understand. No one has visited me in a hospital since Margaret died. 7 years of injuries, treatments, surgeries, always alone." The simple statement, delivered without self-pity, broke my heart. "You're not alone anymore," I said firmly. "I'll be back tomorrow, with Zara. He shouldn't see me like this." "Why not?" "He's seen worse. He's seen death up close." I squeezed his hand. "And you brought him back." "A little hospital room won't scare him." Jack closed his eyes briefly. "You're as stubborn as your mother." I smiled. "Higher compliment than you realize." The next day, Kai insisted on bringing his latest model airplane in, F-14 Tomcat he'd painted in desert camouflage. He placed it carefully on Jack's nightstand. "For protection," he explained seriously. "When I was sick after the lake, my airplanes helped me feel better." Jack touched the model gently. "Thank you, Kai. Does your brain still think you're in the war?" Kai asked, with a child's directness. Jack considered this. "Sometimes, certain sounds or smells can trick it. My brain tricks me to." Kai nodded wisely. "I still have nightmares about water." "We all have our triggers," Jack said. "The important thing is to remember where you really are when it happens." "And who's with you?" Kai added, patting Jack's arm. "That's what Mom always says. Remember who's with you now, not then." Jack looked from Kai to me, something like wonder in his expression. "Wise advice," he said softly. "I'll try to remember that." "This was your idea?" Jack asked, eyebrows raised as we climbed the steps to the Veterans Center. "Art therapy for combat veterans." "Not just mine," I admitted. "Ms. Winters helped design the curriculum. And Marlene thought it might help with the younger vets who aren't connecting with traditional therapy. And your school approved this as your community service project. They loved it, especially after my showcase won first place. The scholarship prize still seemed unreal enough to cover first-year college expenses wherever I decided to go. Inside, a classroom had been transformed with easels, art supplies, and improved lighting. 6 student volunteers from my school's art department were setting up stations. Colonel Marcus nodded as we entered. He and 3 other veterans from my portrait series had agreed to participate in the pilot program. Your girl's got some interesting ideas. Not my girl, Jack corrected automatically. My friend, and yes, she usually does. I felt a flush of pride at being called his friend so openly. Our unlikely connection had deepened over the winter months, especially after his hospitalization. My parents had practically adopted him, insisting he join us for more than just Sunday dinners. Today is just an introduction, I explained to the assembled veterans as more arrived. No pressure to create a masterpiece. We'll start with basic exercises to express emotion through color and line. Jack took a seat at the back, observing rather than participating. I'd expected this. He wasn't ready to expose his emotions so publicly, but his presence lent credibility to the program. Where Colonel Harmon went, others would follow. To my surprise, the veterans embraced the process with minimal resistance. Men and women who struggled to articulate their experiences in words found relief in abstract color fields or symbolic imagery. Never thought I'd enjoy pushing paint around, Darnell admitted, studying his canvas. But there's something about getting it outside your head, you know? That's exactly the point, I said. Art bypasses the analytical brain, goes straight to the emotional core. Jack remained silent, but I caught him watching the proceedings with growing interest. When a young Marine named Tyler became frustrated with his attempts at self-expression, Jack quietly moved to sit beside him. Took me 2 years to talk about Kandahar. I overheard him say, "This is just another language. Give it time." By the 3rd week, the program had expanded to include family members. My parents volunteered to provide simple meals, turning the art sessions into community gatherings. Dad's restaurant experience meant even budget-friendly rice and vegetables tasted like cuisine. You've built something significant here, Marlene told me as we watched the veterans and their families sharing food and conversation after a session. Look at them actually talking to each other. It was Jack's connections that made it work, I said. They trust him, and he trusts you. Marlene nodded toward where Jack stood explaining something to my father, hands moving animatedly. I haven't seen him disengage since before his injury. You've given him purpose. He saved my brother. This is the least I can do. It's more than that now, isn't it? Marlene's shrewd eyes assessed me. You've saved each other in different ways. I couldn't deny it. Jack had become essential to our family mentor to Kai, respected friend to my parents, and something I couldn't quite define to me. Not quite a father figure, not quite a teacher, but a steady presence I'd come to rely on. In one corner, Jack had finally taken up a brush at Tyler's insistence. His strokes were tentative at first, then more confident. I didn't approach to see what he was painting. Some privacy was still necessary, but the fact that he was participating at all represented enormous progress. Family isn't always blood, my mother said, appearing beside me with a tray of dumplings. Sometimes it's who God puts in your path when you need them most. I watched Jack immersed in his painting, a look of peace on his scarred face, and silently agreed. I'm not doing it, Jack said flatly. Arms crossed over his chest, we were in his apartment, the first time he'd invited any of us over. The space was military neat, but surprisingly warm, with bookshelves lining one wall and my portrait hanging prominently near the door. The mayor specifically requested your presence, I argued. It's an official commendation for Kai's rescue. 3 years later, why now? I hesitated, because I may have sent some emails, and the newspaper might have run a follow-up story after the art showcase. Jack's expression darkened. You went behind my back. I didn't think you'd agree otherwise. You were right. He turned away, staring out the window at the spring rain. Public recognition was never my goal. It's not about you, I said, softer now. It's about what your story means to others. He remained silent, shoulders rigid with tension. The ceremony coincides with Military Appreciation Week, I continued. Your experience both as a decorated officer and as someone who continued to serve the community after discharge that matters. Jack, it shows that heroism doesn't end with the uniform. I'm no hero, he said, the words bitter. Tell that to Kai. Tell that to the veterans at the center who look up to you. Tell that to the families who've benefited from the art therapy program you helped establish. You established that program. We did. Together. I moved to stand beside him at the window. Jack, I've never asked you for anything important. I'm asking now. Please do this not for recognition, but for the impact your story can have. He sighed, his reflection in the glass showing the internal struggle. What would I even say? Whatever feels right, the truth, your truth. A week later, Jack stood at the podium in City Hall, ramrod straight despite the tremor in his hands. He wore his dress uniform retrieved from storage for the first time since medical discharge ribbons and medals, creating a colorful display on his chest. The scars on his face seemed less prominent somehow, overshadowed by the quiet dignity of his bearing. My family sat in the front row, Kai practically vibrating with excitement. Behind us, veterans from the center filled several rows, a silent show of support. The mayor's introduction was mercifully brief, focusing on Jack's distinguished service, record, and the selfless heroism that had saved a child's life. When Jack stepped forward to speak, a hush fell over the audience. I'm not comfortable with terms like hero, he began, voice low but steady. What happened at Emerald Lake 3 years ago wasn't extraordinary. It was human. One person helping another in need. He paused, scanning the audience. What came after was the real miracle. Because that boy, he nodded toward Kai, and his family showed me that wounds can heal in unexpected ways. That connection is possible even after loss. That purpose can be found in the most unlikely places. His gaze met mine briefly. Many veterans return from service feeling invisible, defined by our injuries, our traumas, our struggles to reintegrate. We carry visible and invisible scars, but through the kindness of strangers who became friends, I've learned that being seen truly, seen is the first step toward healing. He touched his scarred cheek unconsciously. 3 years ago, I pulled a child from a lake because it was the right thing to do. Today, I stand before you because that child and his family pulled me from a different kind of drowning. They taught me that heroism isn't a single dramatic act. It's the daily choice to keep living, to keep serving, to keep connecting even when it seems impossible. As Jack returned to his seat amid thunderous applause, I saw something I'd never witnessed before tears. In his good eye, unashamed and healing. The medal the mayor presented was impressive, but it was the standing ovation from his fellow veterans that truly moved him. In that moment, Jack wasn't defined by his scars or his losses, but by the lives he'd touched and the bridges he'd built. And as I watched him accept congratulations afterward, I realized how far we'd both come from that first encounter on the number 42 bus. 1 year later, you have everything. Mom fussed, straightening my collar for the 3rd time. Meal card, campus map, emergency numbers. Yes, Mom. And if I forget anything, Seattle isn't the moon. I can come home on weekends. Dad struggled with my last suitcase, pretending it was heavier than it actually was. What did you pack in here? Your entire art studio. Just the essentials, I said, grinning. The art scholarship had been supplemented by an unexpected university, grant enough to cover housing and supplies for my first year at Seattle's prestigious arts college. Kai slouched against the doorway, trying to look bored, but failing to hide his distress at my departure. At 13, he was too cool to show emotion, but the slight trembling of his lower lip gave him away. Remember, you promised to help with my science fair project when you're home for Thanksgiving, he said, voice carefully casual. I wouldn't miss it. I pulled him into a hug. He pretended to resist. Besides, you'll have Colonel Jack checking your calculations. He's way better at physics than I am. The sound of a car horn interrupted our goodbyes. Outside, Jack waited in his recently acquired sedan modest, but reliable transportation he'd purchased after accepting a paid position coordinating veteran outreach programs. Right on time, Dad said approvingly. Military precision, Mom added, with a wink. Jack emerged from the car, moving with greater ease than he had a year ago. Regular physical therapy and the reduction of stress had improved his tremor significantly. The scars remained, of course, but they seemed to sit more comfortably, on his face marks of a journey rather than wounds that needed hiding. Ready for the big day? He asked, helping Dad load my luggage into the trunk, as I'll ever be. The mixture of excitement and terror must have shown on my face. "You'll do fine," he said with quiet confidence. "Your talent got you in. Your determination will see you through." The drive to campus was filled with Mom's last-minute advice and Dad's reminiscences about his own brief college experience before family obligations had pulled him away. Jack drove steadily, occasionally catching my eye in the rearview mirror with an understanding look that said, "Breathe." After the whirlwind of meeting my roommate, arranging my half of the tiny dorm room, navigating the administrative maze of orientation, my family prepared to leave. "I'll walk you out," I said, suddenly reluctant to see them go at the car. Mom hugged me fiercely, whispering Chinese blessings in my ear. Dad squeezed my shoulder, too emotional for words. Kai handed me a small package. "Open it later," he instructed. Solemnly, Jack waited until the others were in the car before offering his hand up. Formal gesture, at odds with how close we'd become. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. Impulsively, I hugged him instead of taking his hand. After a moment's hesitation, his arms came around me in a brief, fatherly embrace. "Sunday dinners won't be the same without you," he said. "Save me some dumplings for when I visit." As they drove away, I opened Kai's package. Inside was a jade dragon pendant, not his original one, but a new one he'd saved up to purchase. A note explained, "For protection at college. Angels come in many forms." 3 weeks later, I boarded the familiar number 42 bus for a weekend visit home. Jack was already seated in his usual spot, reading glasses perched on his nose, engrossed in a book. Without hesitation, I slid into the seat beside him. "Good book." He looked up, pleased surprise warming his features. Getting better by the page. As the bus wound through the city streets, I noticed the jade dragon pendant now hanging from Jack's key ringer, matching one to the one Kai had given me. The original pendants remained with Kai and me, but this new set symbolized the unexpected family we'd formed. "Kai called yesterday," Jack said, marking his place in the book. "He's determined to join the Air Force after high school. Wants me to take him to the recruitment office when he's old enough in about 5 years. Mom must be thrilled," I said dryly. "She come around. She always does." An elderly passenger boarded slowly, looking for his seat. Without hesitation, Jack stood to offer his place, steadying the woman with a gentle hand. I watched the interaction, remembering how differently I'd once interpreted such gestures from him. When Jack returned, standing in the aisle as the bus was now full, a young man rose to offer his seat. "Take mine, sir, I insist." The respect in the young man's voice was unmistakable. He'd noticed Jack's military bearing, perhaps even recognized him from the newspaper coverage of his commendation. Jack nodded his thanks and sat beside me again. "Things change," he said quietly. "People change," I corrected, touching the dragon pendant around my neck. "Sometimes all it takes is a second glance."